like to welcome everyone to the show tonight. Sound like we had a little bit of a problem with our intro music there, kind of echoing. Happened to us a couple of times. But again, welcome to the show, and I feel we really have a great show for you tonight as we have our guest Olav Phillips on, who will be talking about UFOs, anomalies, and conspiracies. So let's get right into it. Let's not waste any time. Olav Phillips is founder of the Anomalies Network, the largest UFO and paranormal information source on the Internet. With 24 years of experience in UFO research and study, Olav's self-proclaimed passion is serving as archivist for the UFO and paranormal community. With a database of over 142,000 recorded sightings, his area of specialization is the application of the latest technology to the field of ufology. Phillips uses technology to derive new sets of information, compile and analyze data in new ways, and develop new theories. He also focuses on the use of technology for information sharing, having launched UFO Crawler, a new search tool that helps users precisely target and gather information from relevant sources, including thousands of documents and files collected in the vast Anomalies Network archive, as well as multiple global resources across the web. Olav, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
And I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Is it Olav?
Olav, yeah. You got it right.
Olav. All right, good. I was kind of worried about that. Kind of a unique name for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the UFO Crawler, I actually heard you talk a little bit about this on Coast to Coast when you were on that, and I found this to be a very great idea to go through and create something that will archive all the UFO sightings and paranormal-related things. So can you tell us a little bit about what this does and how you come up with the idea for it?
Well, basically, much like my website, the UFO Crawler was born out of a need. You know, I'm a UFO researcher, as many of your listeners are as well. And, you know, I'd go to Google and I'd type in, say, Area 51, and I'd get maybe 4 million results. And, you know, I'd get people selling Area 51 mugs, and I would get people who, you know, had a website called Area, and then somewhere on the website they would have the number 51. So what I decided is to build a search engine that would actually specifically target, UFO, paranormal, cryptozoology websites, so that if you put in Area 51, you know by default that the answer you get back is going to be a website that's about Area 51. I'm not going out and scouring the entire Internet. It's a very, give me your site, I'll put it in. It's in there, but, fundamentally the sites that are in there are germane to the subject versus something like a Google or Yahoo where they go out and they crawl the entire universe. I'm trying to be more specific and say, look, the only sites that are inside this search engine are related to the topic at hand. So it makes it a lot easier to find information.
So like you say, this doesn't crawl the Internet. You have to physically or manually put these sites into this database.
Yeah, very shortly we're going to have a tool where people can add their own sites, and it's not beyond the pale. I mean, if you go to Google, right, you can wait for 6 or 8 months for Google to add your site into their index, or they have a tool where you can actually type in the URL and add it to Google. So I'm taking the approach of, enter your site in. I don't care, but I want to make sure that, we add sites that are about the subject. I'm not interested in what do I feel about your site? I'm more interested in, well, it has to do with ufology or cryptozoology, the paranormal, that kind of out at the fringe, out at the edge kind of website. I want you to add it.
So when you start this process, people can just go in and add it themselves. Will there be some kind of review that you will go through before that site's added on?
Yeah, and the review is pretty simple. It's, load the page up and make sure that it has something to do with UFOs. I'm not out there to rank the sites. I'm not interested in that. I believe that people will rank the sites themselves. The idea is to just get as many, we'll take UFOs for example, but it could be anything that's out at the cutting edge of, alternative news or alternative science or whatever, but just for the sake of discussion, we'll say UFOs. If you have a UFO site, I'm not going to say, well, I don't like the content of this, I'm not going to put it in. My passion in that is more of, well, it has to do with UFOs, so let's get it in there so people can search for it. If people don't like it, they won't visit it. Let people make up their own minds.
Right, definitely. Now, how did you decide to come up with something like this? I mean, I've designed our website for our paranormal research group. I'm working on another one that's specifically for the radio show. And I know something like this is just to code it is time consuming, and I do a little bit of scripting. Why did you want to do this, knowing that it's going to take a lot to put all this together?
Well, I think doing it, even though I know it takes a lot of effort, that comes out of my passion for my job. I actually work in the IT industry. So, many IT professionals, we don't just leave IT at work. We take it home, and, we have these exotic setups in our houses. And, but what I try to do is I try to take that passion for IT and move it over to support the website. So I try to take these skills and knowledge I have and leverage it so that the people out there at large who are interested in UFOs or ghosts or what have you, conspiracies, what have you, they can take advantage of these enterprise grade tools that somebody, like an IBM would use, or somebody like a Microsoft would use internally, or PeopleSoft. So I'm trying to take tools that I know already exist, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel, and then apply them to ufology or paranormal studies, conspiracy theory, alternative news. But I started out using an open source tool because, I can code too, but it is, as you said, very time consuming. So I tried to leverage tools that already existed. And I started out with an open source tool that I kind of liked at the time called Nudge. And it's free and anybody can go and download it, but it's hard to configure. And you really have to know some pretty sophisticated stuff within, the operating systems that you're using to be able to configure and deploy a Nudge search engine. So then I was doing searches and looking around, and I came across a tool that was actually sold, or is actually being given away by IBM. It was a joint venture between IBM and Yahoo, and effectively it's a canned search engine, and you can configure certain parameters of it. It's the ability to customize it is extremely limited. But then that's where I applied my scripting knowledge, and I applied some assistance from some friends of mine at EM3, and we integrated it into a content management system. It'd be kind of like a blog, like blogging software, sort of. And we integrated it into that so we could do more sophisticated stuff with it. That's a long story short.
Yeah. And I know what you mean about, IT. I work in the IT department for a casino, and, of course, I spend all day on a computer, and what's the first thing I do when I get home? I sit down at the computer, and my wife picks on me all the time. She says, I don't have enough of that stuff. I'm like, no, not really. I enjoy doing it, and it's nice to be able to do something that you do enjoy, and, I love it. Now, in regards to, go ahead.
And I try to make that extra leap of not only do I love IT, but, I love conspiracy theory, so I try to, hook up both, and that makes a real match made in heaven, and I can sit at home and I'm doing my IT stuff. I get my kind of, dose of my IT addiction, and then I turn around and I do it with conspiracy theory, and I'm in heaven. Great.
Now, this UFO crawler, is this something that is only specific to your site, or can, paranormal groups out there add it to their sites?
Well, yeah, we have a couple of different ways to do that. Within the next probably 2 weeks, we're going to be rolling out some special pages for people who have websites to actually integrate the UFO crawler into their site and to use the UFO crawler to search their site. So you could have the UFO crawler on your website, and it will only search your website, or you can flip a flag and it can search all of the UFO crawler. You can go out and download. Yeah, I think that would be great. And it's just a little chunk of code. Anybody can do it. You don't really have to know HTML very well. But you can go and get the software and you can configure it, but it does take some it's not as bad as Nutch was, but by the way, I love Nutch for any of your listeners who are open source fans. I love open source. I use open source. I like Nutch, but it didn't do what I needed. But
right.
It's a little complicated, I think, for somebody to just go pick up off the web and go, well, I'm just going to stick it on my website. You need a server for it. You need a high bandwidth connection. So I wouldn't suggest that people just go and download it and try to use it. But that's why I'm going to try to make it easy and say, okay, well, if you have a website, I'll provide the service free to you because I already have the server set up and I've already done all the work. So just put this little chunk of code on your website and bam, you have a search engine.
Well, I'll personally be looking forward to that because I would love to add something like that to our site. Because like I say, it really makes it more specific because, Google's a great search engine, but, you're looking for something specific. You don't want to have to dig through, like you say, 4 million hits. You want what you're looking for. If you're part of the say 9/11 truth movement, right? When you put in 9/11, you want to get 9/11, information out that you're interested in. You don't want to get necessarily a website that has 9 and 11 somewhere buried on the page. So right. Yeah.
That's where Google's too big.
It is. Now, the main reason that I had you on the show tonight is I wanted to talk about conspiracies. From my understanding, that is your true passion is conspiracy theories and what you've already stated. And, I kind of wanted to, get your take on some of the conspiracy theories that are out there, past, present, things like that. So, you up to that?
Absolutely. I love conspiracy theories. They're great.
Well, I think one of the best ones to start with, especially with the 60th year anniversary of the Roswell crash just around the corner. July 8th will be 60 years. So, I think it's fitting that we discuss Roswell a little bit and, what you think, out of what research that you've done on conspiracy theories of what you've discovered in regards to Roswell.
Well, when it comes to Roswell, I think the man of the hour is Stanton Friedman. Stanton is a fantastic researcher. He is absolutely, bar none, phenomenal, top-notch. He's one of MUFON's top investigators, and he's done some incredible work. I definitely believe that Roswell was a UFO crash. There's some new information that just came out. I guess Walter Haut, who is the press information officer at the Roswell Army Airfield, he had a deathbed confession, so to speak. There are a lot of these floating around right now. I guess E. Howard Hunt has one as well, but Walter Haut had one, and he actually says that he was part of a meeting after Jesse Marcel had gone out to the crash out in Corona to retrieve material. He was part of a meeting where actually not only was Colonel Blanchard there, but General Roger Ramey was there as well, and they were going over how they were going to try to deflect press interest in the crash, and they actually initially came up with the idea of saying, okay, we've got a crash saucer, we don't know where it's from, yada yada, which how it put out on the wires, and the rest is history. But this meeting had been talked about by Marcel and some of the other people that were involved in it, but it was kind of sketchy, and Walter Haut's document, his affidavit that he actually signed and had notarized prior to his death, it really lays out the entire setup scenario of what they talked about, who was there, and the whole 9 yards. I think it really adds a lot of credibility to it. It's an amazing affidavit, and I guess it's part of it. Go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
Well, and I guess it's going to be coming out in a new book shortly. I forget the name of it offhand, but as far as Roswell, that's the newest information probably in the last, I'd say, 15 years. And it's pretty mind-boggling.
Jesse Marcel Jr. is putting out a book, and if I'm not mistaken, he's going to be at the I guess like the ceremony they have to celebrate the anniversary this year. He will be there to sign books. We actually had Stanton Friedman on last week, and very knowledgeable guy and very funny at that too. he will crack you up while you talk to him. I mean,
he is hilarious. He is the fun. I love him. He's great.
Yeah, he was definitely a great person to have on the show, and definitely a lot of insight on Roswell specifically. And the Roswell, of course, I mean, it's the biggest UFO story that's out there besides, the Betty and Barney Hill incident. And he basically cracked it open. I mean, it happened in 1947, and it pretty much, the story died down after they, come up with the story of the weather balloon. And then in 1978, Stanton interviewed Jesse Marcel, and that kind of opened it all back up.
And the whole story about how he interviewed Marcel is actually quite humorous as well.
It is.
At the time, I don't know if he mentioned this, but I've heard him tell the story over and over again. I guess he was at the time doing a series of college lectures. He was doing the college lecture circuit, and he had gone to this TV station in Louisiana to be interviewed. I don't remember which city in Louisiana, but he had done the first of two interviews, and he's waiting for the second interview, and I guess the reporter was late, and the news director came over to Stanton Friedman, and he said, hey, I know I'm trying to kill time, the guy's not here yet, but you're interested in UFOs, there's this guy, Jesse Marcel, you should go talk to over in, this adjacent town. It turns out, I guess they were like ham radio buddies or something, and Stanton Friedman does the second interview, then makes a beeline over there, and that lit it off. He cracked it wide open.
Right, yeah, you're right. It is a humorous story. Now, in your research of Roswell, has the name Barney Barnett ever come up?
No, I don't recall that one.
Well, from what I've researched out on it, and me and Stan talked a little bit about it, was Barney Barnett had actually claimed to have discovered or come across a second crash around that same period of time, in which he said he was out with some archaeologists around the area. Oh, and I believe the area was Socorro. What's that?
Was that in St. Augustine?
No,
there was some...
Socorro, if I'm not mistaken, is the name of the area in which this one was found.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Right, and I think it was around the same period of time. I mean, like right at the same time as the Roswell crash.
Yeah, actually, there's a theory that they actually collided. That there are definitely two crashes, and that they had actually collided.
Right, yeah, and that's exactly what I've read about it. And I just thought that was interesting, because you don't hear a lot about the second crash. I mean, it's all about that main one that was covered up, said it was a weather balloon, but you never hear of this count from Barney Barnett of a second crash, which he even said that there was alien bodies there. I think there was like 3 that were dead and 1 that was alive, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, now the way that I understand it goes, and sometimes I can mess up the city names, but the one in Corona. Basically, the UFO had disintegrated, and it had basically spread what's left of itself over maybe a quarter of a mile, kind of just an ejection field of garbage. The one in Socorro was actually fairly intact, and I guess it had a rip in the side. And I believe there were 3 bodies that were adjacent to it, and then there was a 4th that was actually still alive. And I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a soldier, and they put the alien on a stretcher and went past the soldier, and the alien cried out, I'm dying, I'm dying. And then they instantly took the soldier and threw him in the corner and debriefed him, and the poor guy threatened him. But yeah, Socorro is fascinating, because it's that if they did recover bodies, that's where the bodies would have been recovered from, was Socorro.
Right. Now, what do you think? I mean, you have the report of a live alien. What do you think ever really happened to it? Possibly still alive. I mean, we're talking, 60 years. Obviously, that would be a long time, but we don't know how long, an extraterrestrial being would be able to live or survive on our planet.
Well, that's actually an interesting question. It leads into other conspiracies, right? That's where you open the door to the vast conspiracy vault, and it's like, okay, well, the gloves are off. The one that survived at Socorro, from my understanding, died pretty shortly after. And I mean, you hear mixed stories. Stanton Friedman is the guy to talk to about that. But I've heard mixed stories that they sent the alien to Wright-Patterson via multiple flights, and he died on the way. I've heard that they sent him out to I can't remember the name right now. But the huge science facility at Alamogordo. They sent him out there, or he was sequestered at White Sands. I mean, it kind of depends on who you ask. The bigger topic is, you know, once you get past that, is that the whole like J-Rod experience, and you know, them having actual live aliens at S4, Area 51, or the whole thing about God, you know, I'm standing on a beach and I'm looking at the sunset. I'm trying to remember the damn name. It's the Mesa. It's like in New Mexico. What the hell's the name of it? It's on the Acute Blood Mesa. It's a secret base. Oh, and they're like 19 sublevels, and it's supposed to be completely run by aliens and big vats of. They supposedly have big vats with human bodies in them, and they're like decomposing them so that they can eat them. The hell is it called?
I wish I could help you.
It'll come to me in a minute. All right. This is embarrassing. I get on the radio and I can't remember the name of the damn base. And oh shit, crap.
Well, anyway, that's all right. I wish I could help you with it.
It'll come to me, but there's a base, and it's on the Acute La Besa, and below it, a Dulce, the Dulce base. That's it.
All right.
You know what happens is you take all this. I've noticed this happens to me in the IT world too. The more information you try to cram into your brain, like the more you push out. Terrible.
Oh yeah, I agree with you there. Now, at one time I had read an interview with, I believe it was a general at the time. For the life of me, we're talking about I can't remember things. I can't remember his name, and I found it to be very interesting. He was talking about, in regards to Area 51, one of the beings that they had recovered and that it was still alive and that they had interviewed it. And he spoke about going into this room, and I believe, actually the guy who was being interviewed stayed outside of the room. He didn't want to go in, and he said his commanding officer, I think 2 other people or so, went in the room, and he said he was standing there watching them, and as they were talking, he said his fellow officers would stick their fingers in their ears. And he said they kept doing that, and he kept trying to figure out why, because, of course, he couldn't hear it. And he said when they come back out, they explained, he said, well, you know, his mouth wasn't moving, and we kept hearing it in our head. And they said it sounded like an ocean wave is how they described it. And he said that's why we kept sticking our fingers in our ear to see if we were hearing them or not.
Well, I've also heard... I heard of an interview once, and you know, then again, that also leads into the whole alien interview video, if you've ever seen that. But I heard of one once that they had a live one in the vault out at Wright-Patterson, and they sent in this is very early on in the 50s, and they had sent a guy in to try to talk to it, figure out what was going on, because they hadn't really probed too far, but this one was totally alive, and I guess it lived for something like 10 years in captivity. And the guy went in, and I guess the alien started like telepathically projecting these awful visions, and was like screaming at him, you know, get me out of here, something effective, get me out of here, you guys are scaring the crap out of me. And then he like projected these visions of like nuclear mushroom clouds and all this crap, and basically drove the guy nuts.
Wow.
And I guess they went through 3 different people trying to interview this one alien.
Yeah, and that would be, you know, definitely a thing to come across. And let me say, if anyone likes to call in, just go on a question or comment on anything we're talking about here, you can call 718-508-9887. That's 718-508-9887. And if you're too shy to come on there, just drop me an email, shadows@easternparanormalinvestigators.com, and we'll get your question. Now, you know, with all the UFO sightings, the stories of, captive aliens, the Roswell crash, Betty Barney Hill incident. I mean, obviously millions of people are not crazy, so why do you feel there's such a huge cover-up on this stuff?
Well, I think that the reason that the cover-up exists is twofold. The first is that originally when these things started to happen, and many conservative estimates say that the original kind of events that led the government to believe that UFOs were real started before 47. 47 was when Roswell happened, but there were actually research programs before that. Because, all throughout World War II, you have the whole experience of the Foo Fighters. There's actually some interesting evidence now that the Germans had captured discs and back engineered them in a facility in southern Silesia. Ted Phillips is doing some great work on trying to find an object that's buried below a mountain deep underground in the Czech Republic. That apparently the Germans were well aware of. They sent multiple Honor Nerby spelunking teams into the area to search out for this one cave that's called the Cave of the Moon or Half Moon. And Ted can go off ad nauseum about that. That's fascinating. You should really have Ted on to talk about it. But after the crash in 47, the government started to think to themselves, what are we going to do? We have a defining moment here. Do we come clean, or do we perpetuate that this stuff isn't real? And they commissioned the Brookings study, where they got all these luminaries of the day, scientists, sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, clergy, about everybody you can imagine that was famous at the time. They put them into effectively a RAND type of think tank, and they produced what's called the Brookings Report. And in the Brookings Report, it's clearly states that the fabric of humanity would break down if we were told that UFOs actually existed and that aliens were visiting us. So at that point, the government said, well, the fabric of all of humanity breaking down is probably a very bad thing. We probably shouldn't do this, so let's keep a secret. And then from then on, they started the secret, and I think they're just so far into it that they can't come clean. Because if they came clean at this point, right?
Right.
You think the impeachment of Clinton was bad over Monica Lewinsky. Think about, 50 years, 60 years of just outright lies and these massive multi-billion-dollar black budgets to back engineer this stuff. And the president doesn't even know.
Right.
You can make a case that Bush doesn't know. Clinton attempted to find out, as did Carter, and they were both told to walk away.
Wow.
So,
yeah. Talking about that, so far into it, and, you take into consideration of, when Orson Welles aired War of the Worlds, I think, was it around 1933 or so?
I think it was 30.
People freaked out. Just literally freaked out. And, not long after that, and you have the crash of Roswell, and you can see that and understand that, at that time. But, definitely today, it seems people are more comfortable with the idea that we're not alone in the universe.
Right.
But like you say, if you're deep into a lie, even 50, 60 years later, chance of you revealing the truth, there's still going to be consequences, even if it wouldn't seem like it would break down society.
Oh, absolutely. At this point, if they came clean, it'd be just a massive witch hunt. And look at the CIA, right? The CIA, 2 days ago, released the quote-unquote family jewels. This set of documents purports to show, detailed information about the assassination programs that they carried out in Guatemala, where they overthrew the Guatemalan government, their activities in Nicaragua, all throughout Central America, their plans to assassinate Castro, extensions of the Bay of Pigs. All these massive things that we knew were there. We had seen documents, right? But, this is the CIA coming clean. Okay, well, they can't completely come clean because, again, it'll be a witch hunt, right? So what they release is 600 documents. I think I heard Richard Dolan on Coast to Coast the other night. He had really gone through it. And he says that out of the 600 documents, 109 of them are blank. 220 of the pages are out of 600. So like 220 of the pages are like duplicates. I mean, it's trash. They do these things to try to placate the populace, but if you run it, it's almost insulting. But the truth of the matter is that if they come clean and say, well, at Kecksburg we pulled a UFO down, and there's actually some really fascinating things about the Kecksburg UFO that we can talk about some other time. But we went out and retrieved a UFO at Kecksburg. This wasn't a Russian satellite as we said it was, but it was a UFO. Well, what happened to it then? And now you've got to expose these massive black budgets where they back engineered it. Is S4 real? If S4 is real, then we really have a problem. I mean, yeah, they're in too far, and I think they're trying to find a way to dig themselves out. I think there are elements within this secret government that are saying, let's come clean, and they're doling out information. They're leaking the Majestic 12 documents. They're doing these little tiny things to try to give us little bits and pieces so that we can put together, the path, the process. We start to know about Operation Blue Fly. We start to see these crash retrieval operations. We get to a point where, we can actually make encyclopedias of all the crash retrievals, but we can never get that smoking gun, because to get the smoking gun, we'll bring them down.
Right.
And then where do you stop? Do you stop in the U.S. government? Do you stop in NATO? Do you stop in the Russian government? I mean, they're all complicit in it. So you have a major problem.
Now, talking about, reverse engineering, back engineering, have you heard about this car that is expected to come out? I think it's in a couple years, that if it gets dented, it pops right back out on its own.
Well, actually, what's interesting about that is I used to have a Saturn. And they actually kind of did that, but they didn't have like memory metal. If you bang the door of a Saturn, it'll actually pop back.
Right. Now this was supposed to be anywhere on the car, that if it gets dented in, that it will pop back out and supposedly not even look like it was ever hit or dented or whatever. Now, it sounds very familiar to the Jesse Marcel claims of what he took home.
This sounds like the piece of metal that Jesse Marcel Jr. handled on the floor. I guess there were two main things that he handled. One was the I-beam that was I think like 12 or 14 inches long, had the hieroglyphics. Then the second thing he handled was some sort of like a sheet of metal that was super, super light. But I hadn't heard that they were making a car that could do that. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out.
Just heard it the other day. That's exactly how they explained it. And, here and I was thinking, well, that sounds very familiar to the
Well, that's the day after Roswell in action, right?
Right. All right. Now let's move a little bit from Roswell, and one of my favorite conspiracies to talk about is secret societies.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's so many of them that are supposedly out there, and of course, one of the most famous, the Illuminati, definitely, had a lot of publicity from Dan Brown's book, Angels and Demons.
Right.
What have you, researched and found in regards to Illuminati?
Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting about the Illuminati, and many times when you look at the Illuminati, you start to delve, much like Dan Brown did, into the religious overtones. Now, the Illuminati was founded in 1776. Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria. He was a professor of theological law. It eventually gained so much power that the Bavarian government outlawed it, and it went underground. Supposedly, the Freemasons are the foot soldiers of the Illuminati. The Illuminati have their tentacles into everything. But one of the very interesting things that I was thinking about is that a lot of times when people talk about the Illuminati, they talk about them as in this kind of religious overtone of they're Luciferian, or they're Satan worshipers, et cetera, et cetera. I've always believed that the Illuminati are beyond that. I think they're a-religious. I think they're so far beyond that it's pure power. But they say power corrupts, right? Well, one of the interesting things that I've seen over time is that if you take the Germans, right, during World War II, the Germans were occultists, and they were master occultists. The Thule Society, the Vril Society, these, they were theosophists. They ran, astrology charts to do their battle plans. I mean, they were very much occultists, especially the SS.
Right.
Well, the Germans at the time, right, came to power very rapidly, and nobody ever really saw them coming. They just suddenly burst on the scene in the early 30s, and the like the beer hall push, these things happened, and they gained power, and over time, and then they eventually became this massively powerful operation that eventually died. Well, one of the interesting things about them is that they had an insatiable need to find Christian relics.
Right, yeah, and that's what I've heard.
Yeah, so there was a group within the SS called the Honor Nerby, and they're the occult sciences division, the racial history division within the SS, and they were really beholden to no one. But it was actually made up of scientists. These guys like Hans Schiffer, the guy from 7 Years in Tibet, he was a zoologist. And, they sent anthropologists and archaeologists out to go find the Ark of the Covenant. There's a famous story about the Sphere of Destiny. The Ark of the Covenant, Noah's Ark. I mean, they went out in search of all these Christian relics. And I've always asked myself why. And so the thing that I've come to over time is that I think anybody would agree with the idea that the Germans were the foot soldiers of the Illuminati. The Illuminati created World War II as a mechanism of control, because whether effectively the Americans, although I have friends in England who would disagree with this statement, but effectively Americans won, but whether the Americans win or the Germans win or the Japanese win, the Illuminati wins, because they control all three. But by creating a world war, they can assert control over the populace, and they have this like threshold where they want to get the population down to like 500 million, because they believe that that's what they can easily have the Earth's support. But the thing I never understood. Go ahead.
Is there any kind of anything that hints that the Germans were successful in finding any of these Christian relics?
Yes. There's a great book by Trevor Ravenscroft called The Spear of Destiny. He talks about the Spear of Destiny being in the, I'm going to lose the name again. It's the Rijksmuseum, not the Rijksmuseum. No, it was the Rijksmuseum in Austria. And once they had gotten a hold of the Spear of Destiny, there was this whole moment when they had occupied Vienna, and they had gone into the museum to retrieve it, and Himmler's there, and Himmler's opening the door, and Hitler's walking in, and it's all majestic, and he sticks his hand, touches the Spear of Destiny, and then he starts to really win, right? And then eventually, so the story goes, he lost the Spear of Destiny. You can see remnants of like the Spear of Destiny concept, and in a lot of the things that the SS did. There at Webelsburg, there's a part of it where Webelsburg was where the SS was run out of, and they had this it was a castle, and they wanted to do this whole Teutonic Knight thing, and they had a round table and all this crap, but there's a part of it adjacent to the actual castle where they were starting to build other buildings, and they had built this I want to say it's like a platform, but it's shaped like the Spear of Destiny. But yeah, there's a lot of evidence that they found stuff. I mean, and it wasn't just Christian relics. I mean, Hans Schiffer went to Tibet twice with Honor Nerby teams trying to find Agartha and Shambhala, to find these underground kingdoms of Shangri-La. But they very much searched all over the planet for all this weird stuff, and there is evidence that they found at least some of it. Definitely the Spear of Destiny.
So now, with the Illuminati, what do you think their main goal is, with having their hands in all kinds of governments? To me, it seems kind of absurd to, somewhat have to say, like, if you basically run the Japanese government, why do you want the Japanese to attack, say, the U.S. when you're over both of them?
Well, because the one thing that you have to see about the Illuminati, right, is that when you control the whole playing field, okay, you have multiple isolated groups of population that you have to assert control over. And the fastest, easiest way to do that is war, because you galvanize your populations into silos. So you have like the good European silo with the Americans, and you have the bad European silo with the Japanese attached to it. So now instead of having to control France and Germany and the Netherlands and Spain and England and Ireland and the United States and Canada, it's kind of, you kind of simplify it. You say, okay, well, I can control the Axis and I can control the Allies. And there are a few countries out there in between, the Scandinavians are like, we don't want any part of it. The Swiss were really allied with the Axis. But generally, you can break it into silos and it's much easier to control. But their ultimate objective, I think, is simply power and control. They've been doing this for generations. They have a hard set number of 500 million people that they want to reduce the population down to. They think they're going to get there somehow. Probably the fastest way to do that is either starvation or war. I mean, you have to ask yourself a question, and I'm a patriot. I love my country. But you have to ask yourself a question, why everything that we do in the United States is a war. We have the war on drugs. We have the war on poverty. We have the war on terrorism. We have the war on everything. We're scared.
Right. Yeah.
Our government scares us into submission. I pay my taxes. I'm not as brave as those guys in Vermont. I think they're in Vermont. The ones who are currently fighting the IRS saying there's no law that says I have to pay my taxes. Dude, I pay my taxes. I don't fight with them. They send me a bill, I pay it because I'm afraid of them. And I think it's really sad that when you're afraid of your own government, I think that, we need a Mr. Smith to go to Washington. We need somebody who's not a Democrat, not a Republican, not a Libertarian. We need somebody who's a common man, who knows what it's like to pay your taxes, to go to, the Piggly Wiggly or Albertsons to go buy your food. I mean, we need somebody who's not an elitist. And we don't get it.
And talking, with like the Illuminati running things, you think that would ever even be possible that your average Joe would even get that chance?
I think we've seen kind of snapshots of it. I think
right.
and I'm not here to talk politics of whether you like the guy or not, but I think you look at somebody like Carter. Carter was a peanut farmer. He wasn't really into the secret society experience, and they shut him down.
Right.
They shut him down hard and fast. I mean, somebody called up the Saudis and said, "Hey, stop pumping oil." Okay, well, that was pretty much the end of Carter's presidency. So I think you get these glimpses. I think JFK was definitely a member of the Illuminati crowd, but for some reason I think he started to rebel against them, and Lucien Sarti put a bullet in his head.
Right.
So I think you see glimpses of it. These guys who maybe are part of the establishment, but then they try to fight back and they die for the attempt. But I think there are people who try. They're either somehow they break through and they get in by pure, populist support, or they rebel against their keepers. But it always ends the same way. They're discredited or they die.
Do you feel that Skull and Bones have any kind of ties with the Illuminati?
Absolutely. The Skull and Bones, in the United States at least, and that's what I can speak best to, is that if you want to recruit new people, right? Because the Illuminati at the end of the day is a power structure. Okay, so you have guys, and it's a pyramid. It's our favorite shape, right? It's a pyramid. It's a classic oligarchy. You've got the guys on the top, maybe 7 guys in the entire world. Maybe it's 7. I've heard it's 100. The whole committee of 100 thing, but right. I've heard that the actual committee that runs the world is like 7 people. But those 7 people have to pass their orders down. So it establishes a chain of command. So then you go to these outfits like the Skull and Bones or the Freemasons or, their Opus D or whoever you want to look at, right? Yeah. They pass the orders through these different layers, and at some point they actually have to attract new people for their organization because you still need people to run these mechanisms of control. So that's where the Freemasons or Skull and Bones come in, is that they're the foot soldiers, but at the same time they're also the recruiting mechanisms so that you can get the brightest minds and you can brainwash them into thinking the way that you want them to think. I'll never be a member of Skull and Bones. I'll never be a member of the Bohemian Club because I don't think the way they do, and I'm too far gone, and I would fight it. I would fight them.
Right.
So they're not going to recruit me. So I'm now one of their dissidents. They're probably tapping this phone, and they're probably listening to this conversation on Echelon, and, terrorist, a nuclear bomb, let's trigger it. But they need a way to keep, because they have the same kind of attrition problem that you have in any corporation, right? You work in a company, people come in, they start out, they get old, they retire, they die in car accidents, or they die of natural causes or whatever. So you constantly need to bring in new fresh talent at the bottom. Plus these people bring in new ideas of how they can get us down to 500 million people. So I think that especially like the Skull and Bones, because it's plugged into Yale, which is one of the top, universities in the country. It's really like a talent show. So they can say, okay, well, these are the brightest minds. Let's, suck them into the military-industrial complex and get them working for us, not against us.
And we've had a lot of presidents that have ties to these secret societies. Both George Bushes were bonesmen, so to speak. Howard Taft was a bonesman. I mean, it's you got people in power that tie back to these power-hungry societies.
Absolutely. Now, the original members were Freemasons. The original founding fathers of our country were Freemasons. After that, they kind of transitioned to be bonesmen. So.
Now, talking about this with the about the power, and we, you kind of mentioned assassinations of like JFK.
Sure.
Yeah, I found it very interesting that when you take a look at the civil rights movement, you had your top spokesman for the civil rights movement basically all assassinated. JFK, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, even though he had a different twist on it, and Martin Luther King. Absolutely. I mean, those were your big ones for the civil rights movement. I mean, just all assassinated.
Right.
And, do you think that was, coming from these secret societies like the Illuminati? You think they sent the orders down to do, to assassinate these people? I mean, because, civil rights, that was a big thing. And, I mean, it's come a long way. And you could see back then where some people definitely wouldn't want this stuff to happen.
Well, to look at that, I think you make a wonderful point, and I would argue that once again, by killing even Malcolm X, I mean, when Malcolm X had kind of gone to Mecca and undergone his conversion, he started to distance himself from the Nation of Islam. He started to preach more of a, let's all just love each other kind of thing, much like Martin Luther King, and he got a shotgun blast. I think these guys, from Kennedy, from JFK, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and these guys, I think they were all killed to create instability. The way that you can rule is fear. I mean, Alex Jones, I think, is the prophet of this. He speaks ad nauseum about the use of fear and control. And I think that a lot of these assassinations, they create fear. I mean, I wasn't alive when JFK was assassinated, but my parents were. My father was in the Air Force at the time. And I can ask them, and they'll tell you exactly where they were. They'll tell you exactly what went through their mind. And what did they both tell me? What does everybody I know who was alive at that time tell me? That when JFK died, right, Camelot ended, and they were afraid for the future.
Right.
Because people looked at JFK. He had galvanized the country. He had taken us to the moon. He did all these amazing things, right? He had some problems, too, with Vicodin and a few other things, but, you know, he had galvanized the country and made the country better, right? And somebody killed him for it, and they were afraid. And then you turn around, and now you've got Lyndon Johnson, total tool of the Illuminati, ups the number of people in Vietnam, you know, commits more resources to fighting across the globe. You know, and what does that create? It creates instability and fear. I think every one of these assassinations that you talked about creates instability and fear. Because the next Martin Luther King's going to say, well, do I really want to stand up? Do I really want to do this? I'm going to die, you know? And you know, you go out there and get another Malcolm X. Do I really want to do this? Somebody's going to kill me, you know? And I think it stifles the population from speaking out.
And we really, you know, since that time, in my opinion, we really haven't had anybody that stood up like, say, these four.
No,
you know, to that,
we really
that stature, yeah, and to get, you know, that much notice for what they were trying to do, we really haven't. And like you say, it's, you know, fear. I mean, you look at even, you know, watch your local news. I mean, there's maybe once a week you get a good story, you know, that's about something that, you know, that happened that was nice or exciting or good for the world. Everything else is about killings and robberies and war, and, you know, and that places the fear to walk out of your front door.
Well, you know, and that places the fear where, you know, maybe people like you and I and your listeners and, you know, others, we stand up and we say, well, the Patriot Act isn't good, and, you know, illegal wiretapping is bad, and we should actually, you know, arrest these people for doing this kind of crap, right? But the mass population sits back, and they've got their, as my philosophy professor used to say, they have their six-pack, and they've got a 49ers game. I'm from the Bay Area. We have the 49ers. They had a 49ers game, and they're content with that. And they won't fight. They won't, you know, say, and by fight I mean stand up and say, this is wrong. You know, if we had everybody in the country stand up and go, you know what, you know, this whole concept of chipping us and, you know, and biometric tagging of us and RFID, this is bad. We don't want this. It wouldn't happen. But there's a principle, and they use it in everything from selling you a car to selling you a life insurance plan to running our country. And it's called FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And all you have to do is inject FUD into anything, and it creates an unstable environment, and then people kind of back off, go into the fetal position, say, please, control me. And it's horrid. I think that, you know, more people should see it. They should be more aware of the fact that they're being manipulated.
And, you know, and it definitely even goes to just a small everyday thing. I mean, I had to rent a vehicle to travel for vacation as mine had broke down, and, you know, there, you know, just a simple thing, you know, so you're traveling out of state. Yes, I am. I'm traveling to Florida. Well, if you have an accident in Florida, you're going to be liable for this vehicle, even under the insurance that we're going to provide you with. You need this insurance as well, because if not, then you're going to have to pay $20,000 if you crash this car.
Right, even though you pay hundreds of dollars a month, just like everybody else does. And my car insurance, you know, I live in California, so, you know, I'm going to hit a BMW or a Jaguar, so I'm petrified. You know, I mean, people who live, you know, out in the Midwest, it's like, you know, you don't have this like concentration of cars, you know, that are, you know, I drive down the street, it's like, crap, there's a Rolls Royce. If I hit that thing, what's going to happen to me, right? And I think that's legitimate fear. But yeah, you know, you pay hundreds of dollars a month to an insurance carrier so that you can, you know, if you crash your car or hurt somebody, or heaven forbid hurt yourself or somebody you love, you know, you got the money to take care of the problem. You can pay for their medical bills. You can buy a new car, et cetera, et cetera. But absolutely, when you buy a rental car, and I'm here to tell you, I get that plan too, and I get the I'm going to fill your gas tank plan. And it is the most ridiculous, asinine thing, because I could just as easily stop at a gas station and not pay like $7 a gallon. But you're like, but what if I don't?
Yeah.
And that's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Extended service plans are a great thing. You go down, you buy your LCD TV, right? You're going to come back, you're going to watch the game. Oh, but what if it breaks? I'm going to have to spend another $1,200 to buy a TV. Well, if I buy this $300 service plan, then I won't, if I drop it, it'll be okay. Well, we all buy them. I buy them on large ticket, like a car. I'll get it on my car. But who's ever used one?
Are you somewhere where there's a lot of wind?
I am.
I get a little wind in there on your phone.
I'm trying to. It's the ocean. I'm trying to angle away from it. Anyway,
but you're right. That there is a lot of fear put into us from all areas of our life, and it is that. And I fully believe that it is part of a mass control. I mean, if people live in fear, they're pretty much going to do what you say. It's like I read this story. We've got a few minutes here, so hopefully I can squeeze it in to get your take on it if you've ever heard of it. Have you ever heard of Digital Angel?
Digital Angels? No.
Okay. What it was, I read it. Oh man, it was probably 7 years ago. I haven't heard anything else about it, and I can't really find any more on it. But what it was a chip that was being made. I can't remember what the name. I think actually the name of I can't remember what the name of the company was, but the product was Digital Angel. And what this thing was they would implant it, somewhere in your body. It would read your vital signs. They said they were even going to make it to be able to use. Yeah, to be able to use for e-commerce, all kinds of things. In other words, if you had a heart attack, your doctor would know about it pretty much instantly. If you got lost, they could track you.
It's OnStar for your body.
Right, exactly. And, I just thought, and it actually even said in this article that human testing had begun.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
And, that just floored me to think that there was actually something being made out there that to put in your body to track all this stuff about you, know where you are, know what your health is.
Oh yeah.
How much money you got,
I used to have a cat, and we had to give them away because we moved overseas. But they actually tag your animals with chips. They chip your animals.
Right, and these, if I'm not mistaken, these were actually one of the same companies that make those chips that was developing this. And I mean, that, like I said, that just floored me to think that our society is that scared that we have to allow someone to put a chip in us to know everything about us. I mean, you talk about the Privacy Act. I mean, that puts the Privacy Act right out the window.
Oh, I know, but we are that scared. That is the tragedy. That's why shows like yours are important, and things like even the UFO call are important. It is you need a way to find out that these things are happening. Personally, I thought it was disgusting when they started chipping animals. I mean, I'm 32 years old. I've had more dogs and cats than I've had fingers and toes. I love animals, but I never had to chip them. I put a tag on them, a little bone for a doggy, or a little like bowl for my cat. Or actually, we use bones for our cats too. It was kind of funny. That's a long story, but that was perfectly sufficient. And I had an animal that was hit by a car, and the person was a wonderful person. Actually brought the animal to our house. We had a little tag for him and said, hey, I killed your animal. I'm so sorry. It was dark. And we're like, well, that's okay. At least it was fast, and we appreciate you bringing him here. You don't need to chip him. And my God, I wouldn't chip my dog, let alone my son. I mean, it's disgusting. There's no need for it. But there are two things, right? There are two ways that they're going to make this happen. And the first is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. They're going to say, well, well, what if you get into a car accident, or what if you have a heart attack? We could have life alert. I've fallen and I can't get up. Well, you don't need to hit a button now. We'll know automatically, just like OnStar, when your airbags are deployed. The second way is ease of living. They're going to try to convince you, saying, look, you put this chip in your wrist, and when you go to Safeway to get your discount, you just kind of slide your wrist across the thing, and there you go. You get your discount. You can charge your credit card. You don't actually have to carry any money. Oh, wait a minute, cashless society. This is another control mechanism of the Illuminati. I mean, if you look at these things, it's par for the course. I mean, you read these books about the Illuminati, even going way back to like The World and Revolution and these other books that were written in the 50s and the 30s about the Illuminati, even in the 1800s about the Illuminati. The mechanism is still the same. It's an oligarchical power structure. It's like a very small number of families that control the entire world. They use these things like the Freemasons to control us. And then they come out with these new and innovative products like RFID tags or like, chipping or barcodes or all this other crap to try to enslave you. And at the end of the day, I've spent your entire show trying to avoid the word, but they're trying to enslave you. Not only are they trying to enslave you, they're trying to reduce the population down to 500 million. That means that we're at like 6 billion now. You can do the math. At least 1 in 10 people, or at least 9 out of 10 people will cease to exist, and that's a very scary thought in and of itself. They don't try to go out into space. We don't try to do anything innovative. We spend all of our time building Echelon bigger, building better mousetraps to kill our fellow man, to control oil that we've already in peak oil. I mean, it's almost too much some days.
Well, Love, we have actually went a few minutes over, so we're going to have to end the show here. I hate we only have an hour, and maybe one day they'll give me a couple more, some of the guests we have on, man, I could probably talk all night with them, and, everything you tell us, definitely fascinating stuff, and I hope, sometime in the future you come back on, because I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about.
Well, I would love to, and I'd love to talk to your listeners too and find out what they think, because it's really about what they think. It's not what I think. So. Well,
and I definitely appreciate your support of the show. We are a newer show, and it's people like you that support us, that help us grow, get this message out there, because I fully believe this stuff people ought to know about. I mean, ultimately it's our life, and we should know what's going on around us.
Well, anything the Anomalies Network can do for you, you just let us know.
I appreciate that very much, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, and I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, again, that was Olav Phillips joining us there to talk about conspiracies, UFOs, the creator of the UFO Crawler. Very interesting stuff we talked about tonight, and I hope everyone enjoyed the show. And thanks again to Olav for joining us. And if you didn't catch his website earlier, that is www.anomalies.net. And I hope you join us next week when we'll be joined by Paranormal Underworld to discuss paranormal investigations and their new website, paranormalunderworld.com, which will broadcast live interactive investigations. If you'd like to check out our website, that's www.easternparanormalinvestigators.com. That's all one word. You can check us out on MySpace at myspace.com/Shadows in the Dark Radio. And if you'd like to drop us an email, feel free to at shadows@easternparanormalinvestigators.com. We'll be glad to hear from you. Our music was provided and composed by Shane Greer. You can contact him at paris6875@yahoo.com. That's PARIS 6875@yahoo.com. And Shadows in the Dark was created, produced, and hosted by Jeremiah Greer. And again, you can contact us, shadows@easternparanormalinvestigators.com. Again, hope everyone enjoyed the show. And remember to always be watchful of those shadows in the dark.
Shadows in the dark.